morning. You're all very welcome to the Mazars payroll breakfast briefing this morning. Fantastic turnout here. Shows the interest in POI modernisation, which is not too far away. My name is Maria Dibley. I'm a partner in Mazars, which is an international firm of accountants, and I have responsibility for the outsourced payroll division within Mazars. And I have to say, the payroll team has been quite busy this year, obviously with the imminent arrival of POI modernisation on 1 January. Which is obviously a major change on the whole POI system since the 1960s. So it's countdown time now. It's 130 days as of from today to 1 January 2019. You know, I was going to count to like 10 days. We're very fortunate to welcome here today Sinead Sweeney, who's the change manager for the POI modernisation with the Revenue Commissioners. And Sinead has been absolutely wonderful in the number of months to date in this year. I think she has already travelled around the rest of the country presenting at events like this. So I suppose in terms of our order of events for the morning, Sinead will speak to you for about 30 minutes on POI modernisation. After that, I will spend about 4 or 5 minutes just to give you some insight into the revenue compliance visits that are currently taking place. They're called post-profile inquiries. So I just spent 4 or 5 minutes just giving you some insight into what we're looking for in terms of those visits. And then finally, our third presenter this morning is my colleague Ken Kilordan, who's a director of our Global Mobility Tax Lead in Mazars, and he's going to tell you about a new revenue guidance that came in actually in April 18 this year, but it is actually effective since 1 January. That's looking back, so we're 235 days into that legislation. So without further ado, and just let you know, the slides will be available after the event, so don't worry about that, and we take questions and answers at the end of the presentation, if that's okay with everybody. And we'll aim to have you out of here by 9:30, if that's okay. So without further ado, can you give a warm welcome to Sinead Sweeney from the Revenue.
Thanks, Mairead. Good morning, everybody. As Mairead said, I'm the Change and Communications Manager for the project for the Revenue Commissioners. So I suppose the main part of my role is to make sure that everybody, all employers, are aware of the changes that are coming down the line from 1/1/19, and that they can look at their own internal business processes, engage with their payroll providers, and make sure that they will be able to comply with the new requirements for their first payroll runs for January 2019. So I have a slideshow to run through with you this morning, and I suppose for some of you, you may have seen this before at another event maybe that I presented at, but for a lot of you, it will probably be the first time that you'll see what the ROS screens are going to look like if you are a payroll operator, or if you're running a business where you have somebody managing the payroll for you. So I suppose it's a good opportunity to get a look and feel of what the system is going to be like, and certainly when the three of us have finished presenting, we will have a question and answers session then at the end. So if you have questions, I'd ask you maybe to hold on to them until the end, and we'll try and get through them all then at the very end. So just in terms of putting some background and giving you some context in terms of why we're doing this and the reasons behind the changes. The system that we have at the moment has been with us since the 1960s, and very little has changed in terms of how we calculate, compute and collect that tax. It was initially set up in the UK to bring in and to raise funds for the war effort, and then we piggybacked on that, and it was a mechanism of raising taxes here in Ireland. Since 1960, everything in our external environment has changed dramatically. The nature of employment being one in particular, whereby back then most people had one job for life, and they usually maintained that job for the majority of their careers. You now have people moving between jobs on a very regular basis. You also have people working several jobs at the one time. And really the revenue systems were not built to be able to accurately capture that information. So we needed to review how the system takes on board that somebody has several employments, or maybe works different employments at different times of the year. Payroll has changed significantly since the 1960s. Back then, for most people, it was a manual process, pen and paper, maybe an abacus, Spreadsheets then evolved, Excel came along and things evolved. And now, for most people who are running any size of a payroll, maybe more than 5 people, they're usually using a software package to assist them with that. So all of that has led us to be able to use the information and communication technologies advancements that are available to us, so that now we can get information in from employers, from payroll bureaus, from agents, as it actually happens in real time. So when somebody is paid, that information seamlessly transfers with the use of information technology to ourselves in revenue. And then people expect to be able to deal with revenue in an e-enabled and efficient way. For any of you maybe who have had to phone the 1890 at some period, maybe because you're phoning up on behalf of the staff member, or because something on your own pay has changed, or there's an issue with something on your tax credits. More often than not, the person on the end of the phone will have had to say to you, well, I can't really help you with this at the moment because your employer hasn't returned this information to us yet. Because we don't get that information until the P35 comes in the following February. But the person may have an issue today and we're not able to help them. Now, with the new system, we will be able to help them. We will be able to give them an answer. We will be able to see what tax credits has been applied by their employer and make sure that everything is running correctly. So in terms of efficiency, all around, that should be a bonus for everybody. We would see 3 main beneficiaries, I suppose, in terms of this system. The employer being the first one. And what we want for employers is that the new system will seamlessly integrate with their existing payroll processes and systems. We want to minimise the costs for employers to comply. In the main, a huge amount of time is spent by employers on the admin end of managing the PAYE processes. Filling out P30s, organising P35, making payments, then at the end of the year processing P60s, and dealing with the queries in between all of that. So we are removing all of those P forms. So there won't be a P30, there won't be P35s, there won't be P60s, there won't be P45s, which again are removing timely processes from employers and freeing up some of the employer staff times. It will mean that the right tax is paid by all of the employees at the right time, but there are no changes to the payment dates. So the payment dates remain the same. If you're filing and paying online, it's the 23rd of the following month. If you're paying physically, manually paying, it's the 14th of the following month. So those dates are not changing, but we will have the information in a timely manner. And ultimately that should result in time savings for the employer. For the employee then, they will have access to simplified online services. And this is a new departure for employees, because now when they're paid and their employer returns the information to revenue, they will be able to log on under My Account and see what the actual employer has returned for them. Their pay, tax, PRSI, etc. will all be visible nearly instantaneously as soon as the employer has returned it to revenue. And that does give employees a new level of transparency, because unfortunately we do have rogue employers out there who deduct PAYE and PRSI from employees but never actually pay it over to revenue. And it only comes to light maybe when somebody leaves their employment, they go to the Department of Social Protection to claim maybe unemployment benefit. Lo and behold, nothing has been paid and returned on their behalf. So it is an important level of transparency for employees. We're also going to do an automatic end of year review, and this will ensure that all employees are only paying the right amount of tax. We don't want them overpaying, and we certainly don't want them underpaying. So at the end of 2019 and into 2020, there will be an automatic system review for every employee that's registered with revenue. For ourselves then in revenue, we're going to have a statutory in-year employer return. So at the moment, the P35 is the only return with statutory. There will now be a monthly return in respect of everything that has been paid over by the employer on behalf of the employee. It's not a return as you know it, whereby you have to go populate it and send it in to us. It will form part of a process within the real-time system whereby we will issue a statement and that will become the employer's return. And I'll explain that a little bit more when you see the screenshots. It'll allow us to intervene much earlier where we see things maybe are not going quite right. We will have accurate income details for all of the employees. And over time, it should reduce customer contacts. As with any new system, we do expect an upsurge in customer contacts when it goes live. To that end, we have increased our staffing numbers, and the employer helpline, which currently at the busiest times has between 25 and 30 staff working in it, will have 100, but we will also have in the background at least another 200 staff actually there to be able to take calls from employers when the system goes live. So there shouldn't be any issues with the systems and help from sort of the end of December right through January, February, March, when the bedding in period for employers. It also will allow us to do timely targeted interventions. At the moment, if we go out to do a PAYE audit, we're usually looking at information that has been transacted maybe in a previous 2-year period. We can now go out and look at a previous month or a combination of previous months, which means if things are going wrong, we can intervene and get it corrected before it escalates into a much bigger problem and get it up and running correctly for the employer almost immediately. Just to put some context in terms of the kind of numbers and people that we're dealing with, we have 2.8 million active employments currently registered with us. So that's everybody that's registered as an employee and also people who are in receipt of pension payments. We've 256,000 employees that currently on our system are registered as having more than one employment. So where they are working maybe several jobs or maybe have seasonal jobs and work between those jobs during the year. We've 219,000 registered employers, and that's certainly a significant amount of people to make sure that they understand what's happening with PAYE modernisation and what they need to do to get ready. 111,000 of those employers have less than 5 employees, and that's something that we're very cognizant of, and we have built the systems to be able to take the information from employers who maybe don't use payroll or maybe are non-E enabled and have an e-filing exemption. There will be a paper format available for those smaller employers. So we have built the system to cater for all of the types of employers that we have out there at the moment. 98% of those employers are currently engaged with us in an electronic format. So they do currently file their returns and their affairs with us electronically through us. This part is a little bit like a school lecture. These are the current obligations for employers, okay? And I suppose sometimes these fall between the cracks and things don't follow through and complete processes, which causes problems for ourselves, but will certainly cause problems for the new system. So I suppose if people can maybe take this on board at the moment in terms of, are your processes correct? Are you doing things correctly now? It will be much simpler by the time you actually come to setting the new system up and running PAYE modernisation. So every time you pay somebody, you need to apply the latest P2C. And that's very important because the P2C sets out that individual's tax credits and rate bands for the coming period. Particularly if they are in receipt of illness benefit or any other DEASP payment. That P2C will be amended regularly to take account of those payments. So it is important to check that you are using the most up-to-date P2C before you go to pay somebody. You need to calculate the tax that's to be deducted and provide the employee with a payslip that clearly shows their pay and tax deductions. If somebody starts or leaves, you need to complete a P45 or a P46. Every month or quarter, submit a P30 with the relevant payment, and then at the end of the year, complete the P35 with the associated listing for the staff. So I suppose in order to do all of this, we've had to amend the existing PAYE legislation. The majority of the legislation has now actually been passed into law, and that happened in the Finance Act 2017, which our President signed in on Christmas Day. So the main provisions, and I'm not going to get into all of them, but the main provisions are the ones that I have listed up there. The P2C that you currently use and apply is now going to be called a Revenue Payroll Notification, so an RPN. The key change in terms of actually transmitting information to revenue is that within the legislative provisions, payroll submissions must be returned to revenue on or before the money becomes available to the employee. Okay? So every time you pay somebody, every time you run that payroll, before the person or as the person is being paid, that information needs to come into revenue. The monthly statement that we will issue will be deemed as the employer's return by the 14th of the following month. There is an opportunity for employers to go in and correct that statement, maybe if there has been an error in the payroll, and again, that will come back into us and we will reissue a new statement. The employer also has the option to do nothing, and we will deem the return as being their liability for that period. If there happens to be a persistent technology failure, so if you were to take, for instance, the most recent snowstorms or our other big storm, where businesses were closed, power lines were down, internet maybe isn't working, and that's the day that you're due to upload the information to revenue. There won't be any penalties or interest in those circumstances, and as soon as the systems come back online, you can upload the information, and that's built into the legislation. The direct debit facility that a significant proportion of the employers currently use will remain, but there's also the option to have a variable direct debit. And this has really come to us from being out and about with employers, and they've said, look, can we just pay the amount that's due every month, rather than paying either too much every month or having an underpayment at the end of the year where they have to top it up. So now the option will be there to just pay whatever the liability is on that monthly statement. In very basic terms, this is how it's going to work, and this is the process flow for the payroll processing. So as an employer, you'll go on and you'll have your employees that you're going to pay. If you're using payroll software, you will be able to access the RPN details through the payroll software. You'll then be able to run your calculations, whatever the person is going to be paid, create your file for processing to the bank, create your pay slips, and at the same time, the software will submit that payroll information to revenue. So it's a very seamless process. It's an added step. The majority of the payroll providers are designing what we would call a direct reporting system, whereby the software will speak to the revenue software backwards and forwards, and there's no need to log in and out of ROS. Some of the payroll developers are designing slightly different systems, and I'll show you some of those screenshots in a moment. I would encourage all of you to engage with your payroll providers and make sure you understand what type of system they are designing for you. The individual then who's going to get paid isn't going to see anything really different. They'll still get their pay, they'll get their pay slip, but they can now go on to my account under Jobs and Pensions and view their pay and tax deductions. So how are we going to get rid of all of these P forms? And I suppose just to put a little bit more meat on the bones of what we're going to do. So the statement that we're going to issue every month will be made up of the submissions that have come in from that employer. So for instance, if you take somebody that's running weekly payrolls, depending on the month, they may have submitted 4 or 5 payroll runs to us. At the end of the month, we will total all of those submissions, and what will come back to them will be a statement showing what is due for that period. We won't be manipulating the figures, we won't be doing any calculations. There will be verification checks for when the submission comes in, but not in terms of calculations. So if errors have been made within the payroll process, they will need to be corrected. If they make a correction, we will issue a new statement to the employer, and then that will become their return for that period. If there are new employees commencing or leaving within any time that the payroll is being processed, When you go onto the payroll and you set up a new employee, by inserting a commencement date, when that payroll submission comes into revenue, that will register the new employment with revenue. So you don't have to go on and register the individual. By putting them into the payroll, that's going to trigger a new employment. The individual can also go on themselves to my account under jobs and pensions and register the employment themselves as well. And for first-time employees who've never worked in the state before, they have to go on and do that themselves anyway. When they're leaving then, you'll insert a cessation date into the payroll, and again, when that comes into revenue, that will tell us that that job is now ceased and the person's credits become available for their next employment when the next employer puts in a commencement date. So it's a much more seamless process. There's no hanging around waiting for P45s and P46s to be processed. When somebody comes to join your workforce, you will immediately be able to get their tax credits and deductions. In terms then of the end of year process, so there isn't an end of year process. Every month is now a statutory return, and every month should be timely and accurate insofar as possible. We know a lot of employers focus on the end of the year to tidy things up, maybe to catch things that they haven't managed to tax correctly during the year, and they fix it all up before the P35 comes in. That's gone. And that's a significant change for a lot of employers, particularly maybe the smaller employer, or particularly accountants who are managing maybe very small employers who have one or two seasonal employees. Maybe they come in at the end of the year with a shoebox of invoices and receipts and say, do me up a P35. I've been paying Johnny 500 every week for the last however long. That process is gone. And that's something that needs to be brought home either to your own clients or to your own staff if that's something that you're currently being engaged in. Every month is now a statutory return, and there will be penalties and interest on a monthly basis if that's not returned correctly. So you do need to be aware of that and look at your own internal business processes. Then from 2019, there will be no requirement on employers to provide a P60. So their last P60 will be 2018, and on the P60 stationery, there is a note to tell them that this is going to be their last P60. Going forward then, what employees will be able to do is to access an end-of-year statement under my account on revenue.ie, and that will contain all of the information that would be required, similar to a P60, except that it will show all of their employments. So if people have several jobs and maybe they're going for a mortgage before, they would have to go and get a P60 from each of their previous employers. Now all of the information will be in one place on one statement. That statement will be accepted by all of the lending institutions, the likes of the county councils, the HSE, SUSI grants. We've been engaged with all of those entities that look for P60 information, and they know that there's change coming and that this will be the new format for P60 type of information. So it'll be an end of year statement. For those maybe who are not e-enabled, they will have the option of contacting us either by phone or coming into one of the public offices and accessing that statement. We'll send it out by post to them where they're not e-enabled. But the most efficient way is to be able to access it online. So I suppose just to fill out a little bit more in terms of how the payroll is actually going to work. So where the software developers have designed the direct payroll reporting process, when somebody goes on to start their payroll, the payroll software will request the revenue payroll notifications. Okay, so it'll all happen in the background. Then they will also request RPMs for anybody new that you have just put onto the payroll. There'll be an option there to poll for RPMs. From the systems that I have seen that have already been developed, it's very simple. There's an additional button on the software that allows you to request RPMs, updated or new RPMs for all of the people that you're going to pay. Then we will allocate the credits based on the most up-to-date information that we have for all of those employees, and then that information will be returned within the revenue systems through the payroll software. Then your payroll software will use the details that we have returned to calculate the statutory tax and deductions, And if there are any new employees added at that stage, once again, the payroll can hold for a new RPN for all of those. The payroll software then will return the payroll information to us in revenue. The start and the end dates, as I said, will be returned as part of that payroll submission. We will send back an instantaneous acknowledgement to tell you that we have received your payroll submission. And we'll also send a response if there are any errors on that payroll submission. In general, errors will relate to incorrect PPSNs or no PPSN having been submitted for a particular employee. And then you'll be asked to go back and correct that or look at it and see why you don't have a PPSN for a particular person. I'll explain that a little bit more when we get into it. If then the payroll software isn't designing the B2B, customer-to-customer type relationship, the payroll operators will have to go on and engage with ROS, and this is what it's going to look like. So anybody that's operating payroll software and is the person who's going to be submitting the payroll needs to be able to have access to the ROS digital cert. So if they currently don't have that access, it's something that you need to look at and make sure whoever is going to be submitting the payroll has access to the ROS digital cert. The other thing is the person who's submitting the payroll will be able to see all of the payroll information that has been submitted. I know for some businesses they may operate separate payrolls, maybe for the executive payroll and the staff payroll. It is important to bear in mind if they're all under the one prem registration, they will now all be visible to the person who is submitting that. If it's something that's going to be an issue for yourselves, you may have to look at getting a separate prem registration for one of those payrolls where you don't want the individual to see the payroll. So logging on with the ROS digital cert, and what you'll get, I know maybe the lights are shining on that, so it might be a bit hard to see, but we will make the slides available. You'll have my frequently used services, and then there are several options. So you can request an RPN, look up a PPSN, send us in the employee list, which I'll explain momentarily, submit a payroll, look at a previous payroll, and then look at your end of month statement, so your statement of account. So it's very easy, it's all sort of a click and the information will be there. So if you want to request an RPN, you'll have two options, either by file upload where you have payroll software, or by online form, maybe where you're doing it manually, and you'll have to just request by PPSN the RPNs for that staff member or those staff members. Once you click in there, it'll ask you to upload your details in terms of your PPSNs and the people that you need RPNs for, and then that will be transmitted and will come back to you. You'll have to download it like you do with the P2Cs and upload it into your software. Okay, so bear in mind this is where the software is not doing the direct payroll reporting system. To submit a payroll online then, you'll go on to payroll submission manual input or payroll submission file input, again depending if you have or haven't got software. So you'll go in then if you haven't got software and you'll select the employees that you're going to pay. I've just put two up there at the moment, but if you have 5 or 6 employees registered for you, we will have those pre-populated on the system so you can go in and select the person that you want to pay. Okay? You then have to go in and put in their basic details. So the likes of their employee name, PPSN number, a unique employment ID, pay frequency and the number of pay periods that this is representing. And what you'll get back, I know that's very hard to see, is basically the tax credits, rate bands, and then you have the opportunity where each of those square boxes are to go on and populate the details. So you put in what their pay is, what their PRSI is, what their USC is, if you're paying pension deductions, or any other details, they're all listed there. Be easier to see when we send you out the slides, you can have a look at it yourselves. And you submit that. That's basically it in a larger screen there. Pay for USC, USC paid, everything that goes into calculating the gross to net in terms of their statutory deductions. And you'll submit that, and then you'll get back a statement showing you everything that you have populated for that individual, and then you can submit it once you're happy that it's correct. And in this one then, you can see here, it gives you a line detailed summary. So if you put 5 people in there, you'll have 5 lines of information, and you can check that what you have populated is correct before you click submit on the bottom. And once you've submitted it then, you'll get back an acknowledgement to say thank you, and you can go back in and view that payroll if you need to. To go back in and view a payroll, because maybe you want to see something from 3 weeks ago or from a previous payroll run. Again, it's very simple. You click on what type of, is it a payroll run reference, because each payroll submission will get its own reference number. So you can look at it by reference number. It will hold the last couple of payroll runs that you've submitted. So that browsing history will come up and you'll be able to click on the reference number that you want to look up. And then it'll give you the payroll information. I've put this one up here to show you that in this particular payroll run, there were 7 invalid items which needed to be corrected. And again, the onus is on the employer to go back and correct that, to make that return correct. So again, I'm just giving you that as sort of an info so that you can see what an invalid item would look like. And there will be an explanation when you've submitted that as to what the error is and what you need to correct. That's the line detail, again, showing the person's name, PPS, and how much has been paid for each of them. And you'll see up there it says there were 50 active items, but there are 7 invalid. So basically there were 7 issues with this payroll submission that needed to be corrected. The statement then is probably where most employers will be going to see what their liability is. For this one, I've just put up 4 monthly returns so that you can see what it looks like from the previous months. So the one here on the bottom has been deemed, which means the employer didn't need to make any changes. They were happy with what we submitted and we deemed that as their return. The next one was accepted by the employer. The next one was accepted, and the top one is the current monthly statement, and they're waiting to view or accept that. So once they click over here on the right-hand side, view or accept, it brings them into the summary details. So basically, up the top will be whatever you have submitted for that month. Okay, so if you've had weekly, fortnightly, and monthly payroll all under the one cram registration, they'll all be summarised and they'll be there. You then have the option to go on and accept it if you're happy with it. Or as I said, you can do nothing and we will deem it as your return. If you need to make a correction, you'll go on and you'll resubmit the corrected information, and then that will change that statement for you. PPSNs. We have been carrying out a review of PPSNs in our own data based on the 2016 and 2017 P35s. And the data is horrific. The amount of incorrect PPSNs that come into us, the amount of payroll information that comes in with no PPSN, and the amount of the same PPSN that's in use by different people is astounding. In terms of correcting it, we have designed a PPSN checker for employers to use, should I say. It's available in Ross, and I'll show you some screenshots now of it. You can check up to 10 PPSNs at any one time. And I know there are difficulties in verifying that John O'Brien is John O'Brien and that that's his PPSN and it's not his dad's PPSN that he's presented with. And we do have some guidelines on revenue.ie as to what verification documentation you should use. But this PPSN checker certainly will assist you with verifying that you have the correct PPSN for the person that you're about to pay. So if you're taking on somebody new, I'd urge you to check that you have the right PPSN for that person. We have built in some security on it because obviously we want to protect for phishing from PPSNs and particularly under GDPR regulations as well. So the results that we'll send back to you will say that yes, this PPSN is correct, or no, you need to go back and contact the employee, or you need to check what did you search under for this PPSN. So it looks like this. Basically, you have very basic details: name, surname, date of birth, address, etc. And what you need to confirm with the employee is that you're searching on the same characteristics that they're registered with revenue as. Particularly maybe where somebody has got married and changed their name because they may have registered under their maiden name with revenue. You put in Mary O'Brien, she's now Mary O'Neill, you won't find the correct PPSN because all of the characteristics won't match. So you do need to check with the employee that you're checking their PPSN details as how they've registered with revenue, okay? So you'll submit it, you can add up to 10 employees, it's very simple to use. And what you'll get back is something along these lines. The first one says it's valid, the second one says it's invalid. When you click on the valid, it gives you the information to tell you that yes, this is correct and you can go ahead and use it. It doesn't say yes, this is Mary O'Brien's PPSN. Again, under GDPR, we can't put that information up there. For the one that's invalid, it tells you that what you have supplied to us doesn't match with our criteria. It's not necessarily saying the PPSN is incorrect, but you do need to go back and check that you're using the right search criteria. So we're getting very positive feedback on that from employers, and it's certainly getting quite an amount of use. Okay, just in terms of some of the items that have come up as issues when we're out and about meeting with people, and net pay is certainly one that has come up at quite a lot of events, where employers have agreed net pay arrangements with their employees, and then unfortunately at the end of the year when they've gone to do their P35 they've realised that the tax credits have actually been allocated maybe to a spouse or to another employment that they haven't informed their employer of. That leaves the employer open to that liability, and under the new legislation that liability can be grossed up. So it's very important that net pay arrangements are not something that you agree. Under the new system, there's no need for net pay arrangements. You will have an RPN available to you immediately to tax the person correctly. Okay? So I suppose it's just something that we know has come up as an issue, and I just want to raise it with yourselves. If it's not something that you're engaged in, great. If it is, you need to go back and look at that. We know as well, as I said already, that a lot of employers focus on the end of the year, and I suppose that's one of the key messages you need to take away from here today. There isn't an end of year process. Every month is exactly the same. December is no different from March or April, and there will be compliance activity next year where we see spikes in December payrolls where things haven't been captured correctly. So you do need to make sure that every month your payroll is accurate and correct. It's also important to bear in mind that this new process makes everything very visible. It's visible to ourselves in revenue, but it's also visible to your employees. And they must be able to match what's on their payroll and what's on their payslip with what's on the revenue payroll systems. If they can't match that, they'll be straight on to us or they'll be straight on to you. So you do have to make sure that that's timely and accurate. We have allowed for corrections because we know with payroll there are always corrections. People don't feed information in on time, or somebody forgot to pay Johnny his overtime, or whatever has happened. And that has been built in as part of the process. You can go in and correct a payroll run at any time. If the information contained in the statement that we have issued is incorrect, there is an obligation on the employer to fix that information. And that is part of the legislative process. So you do need to go in and make sure that that information is fixed and that the return reflects the correct liability for the moment. It's important to bear in mind that everything that you put in will also come in as part of our risk analysis systems. And it's important to understand that if we're constantly seeing corrections, we will be contacting the employer to find out what's wrong, what's going wrong with the internal business processes, that there are constant corrections on this payroll. To get the data right, we have been running a data alignment project, and this is very important because we need to know that everybody that's working for you is one and the same as the people that we have registered as working for you. We know at the moment P2C is sometimes an issue for staff that are no longer in employment with that particular employer, because somewhere along the line the P45, P46 process hasn't been fully completed. So what we're asking is all employers to send us in a list of their employees, and we will then match that up with what we have on our revenue systems. We started it in July, and it's been, I suppose, captured in 3 tranches. The first tranche covered what you have up there on the screen. The second tranche has just commenced now, and the last tranche will be in September. Basically, if you log on to Ross, there will be in the Ross front page a banner telling you that it's now your turn to log in and to upload your employee list. Okay? Payroll software developers have designed reports that will allow you to pull this and send it into us very seamlessly. We have had pretty good uptake at the moment. I think we're up to about 6,000 submissions from employers, and we only started it in July, and we're running through those and sending back then errors or invalid items, or maybe where employments weren't correctly ceased or registered. We've been registering and ceasing those employments. So new P2Cs have been issuing for anybody that's now registered with us. So I'd urge you to go back and have a look and see what's up on the Ross banner and prepare your employee list and get that into us as soon as possible. There is an e-brief, and that issued in June, and that's available on our own revenue website. And then the employer help desk will handle all queries in relation to that employer list. I suppose just to give you a flavour, and it's probably hard to see there on the big screen, of some of the places that we have been and some of the representative bodies that we've been meeting with. We have been out and about since January 2017, and I think to date we've been at over 240 events, whereby we've been meeting with the large and small representative bodies, the likes of the Small Firms Association, IREC, payroll bureaus, agents, professional accountants, any of the representative bodies representing the tax accountants, the ITI, CAI, CIMA, any of those bodies whereby we can get in and reach people who are managing and operating payroll. And you can see there, we've been meeting with a lot of the larger bodies as well, the likes of SIF, the likes of, any of the hotel industry, all of those larger representative bodies who particularly have a lot of seasonal staff and a lot of movement in their payrolls. So I suppose we'll continue to do that, and certainly even since I put these slides together, more dates have been added there for other events as well. We have issued letters to all employers telling them that PAYE changes are coming down the line. As I said, we've been out and about at as many events as we possibly can. We do have what we call national compliance imperatives, and I know Mairead is going to speak a little bit about the compliance visits that are currently happening. And there is a focus on PAYE and PREN there, so you may get letters telling you that there's going to be a compliance visit and they're calling out to have a look at your books and records in terms of PAYE. We're also doing customer service visits, and they're a slightly different type of visit. That's where we have teams calling out to help and assist you to get ready for PAYE modernisation. They're not coming to look at your books and records. They're coming to help you with the payroll processes and to make sure you understand what's required for 1119. So if you do get a call in relation to those, I would ask you, to let the person either come out and meet you or to engage with them on the phone. They're doing both types of kind of meet and greets at the moment. We will be running a media campaign which will be kicking off now shortly in September and running right through December. At the moment, our focus is on employers because they are the ones that are immediately impacted by these changes. We will be focusing on employees, but later on in the year, because the main changes for them initially will be if they leave their employment in January, they won't get a P45. But the main changes will really come at the end of the year where they don't get a P60. So again, they're not the focus of our attentions right now. It is employers that we're focusing on. And we are going to be running regional revenue seminars as well, whereby we will have, quite informative sessions, and I'll put some information on those in a moment for you. This is probably one of the key things that we want you to take away from today. And that's about what can you do as an employer to get ready? What can you do maybe for your clients to help them get ready? So making sure that you have the right PPSN for everybody that you're going to pay. making sure that everybody is registered with revenue. We had 128,000 people returned to us for the first time on the P35, even though they were working for their employer for the whole year. So you need to make sure when somebody starts with you, you register them immediately with revenue. Making sure you're operating from the most up-to-date tax credit cert. If somebody stops or commences with you until the new system goes live, you have to do the P45, P46 process. And then making sure you have adequate controls in place if you're paying VIK or any other notional pay amounts, that you can stand over how that's being calculated, because now it's going to be coming in monthly. And particularly for the likes of car VIK, we would suggest that you would review that at least quarterly, but ideally monthly. And making sure you're aware of your duties as an employer at the end of the year. The seminars will take place from around the 20th of September right through to the 31st of October. They will be in most counties around the country, and we have asked employers and agents to go on and register on revenue.ie to attend one of those seminars. If you have gone on and registered, you will be getting an email shortly to tell you that the seminars are now live and you can go on and book a place using the Eventbrite ticketing system to select which hotel or which venue, what time you want to go and attend at. There'll be a limit on attendance at each venue. It'll be 150 probably per session. So, you know, if you have a particular venue that you want to attend at a particular time, you do need to go on and book that as soon as it goes live. They're free to attend. We will have demonstration screens of how the system is going to work and look. And we'll also have plenty of staff on hand for individual questions or queries, or, you know, maybe somebody needs some assistance with what they need to do to get ready. So I'd encourage you all to have a look at that on revenue.ie. It's very simple to register at the moment, and as soon as the Eventbrite is set up, it will be very easy to go on, select where you want to go, and hopefully turn up for that event. We have about 15,000 people registered at the moment, so I'll be doing a lot of speaking for the next 2 weeks. In terms of information then, for those that are used to dealing with ROS, there is a ROS help desk available there, and it's up on revenue.ie. And again, we'd encourage you, if you have any sort of technical questions or you have difficulty uploading anything, to use that ROS help desk. And then from our own point of view, up under revenue.ie, under employing people, we have a dedicated section there called PAYE modernisation, and that will be updated with anything that changes, any of the new processes, etc., as things happen with the project. So I'd encourage you to go on there and have a look at that. We also have a dedicated email address, and certainly we have a huge volume of traffic on that on a daily basis. So if you have any questions or queries maybe that we don't get to today, I'd encourage you to send them in there on that email address. I have a team of staff in the office that are managing that, and certainly we try and get back to people as quickly as possible with answers on that. So thanks for your attention, and I'll hand you over to Marie.
So I'm going to cover off inbound employees to Ireland and the employer tax obligations in relation to this category of people. I apologise in advance that this will be a reasonably technical nature of my presentation today. So it's just given the nature of tax is technical, complicated at times, but I'll try and simplify it as much as possible. So just in terms of what my presentation is very much going to focus on for about the next 15 minutes or so, I'm going to cover off foreign employment performed in Ireland. So we're talking here about, we've got a home country employer, a non-Irish employer, so the employee is employed by them, paid by them, they come on assignment to Ireland, or you can have a situation for an employee or an executive come just as business travel to Ireland. So before I delve into the new revenue manual and the new rules that are applicable this year, I just want to do a little bit of a history lesson on it. So from 2006, the income of foreign employments, the income that's attributable to the performance of duties in Ireland is liable to Irish PAYE. Okay? However, subject to meeting certain conditions, the revenue commissioners were willing to give an exemption from the obligation to operate PAYE in situations where the employment income was relieved from tax by reference to a relevant double tax agreement. So in 2007, the revenue issued a statement of practice, SBIT 307, And that was quite a good guide, and it set out the conditions under which an exemption can apply or not. And we all followed that guide for successive years, and that was all fine. But then in December 2016, the Revenue amended the statement of practice, and unfortunately from that point on it made it much more difficult to get an exemption from the operation of PAYE withholding for any employee who spent more than 30 work days in Ireland. As a result of those challenges and difficulties, the Revenue engaged with relevant stakeholders in relation to the issue, and that resulted then in the publication of a new Revenue Manual covering this area. So this new Revenue Manual, it was published in April of this year, but was effective for all assignments going back to 1 January 2018. It essentially replaces the old Revenue Guide, SVIT 307, and what I would say, it's a 60-page document, so if anyone is working in this area, I would obviously highly recommend that you read the document. What I'm going to try and do this morning is just give you a high-level overview of the main points, and in particular to focus on the changes that are in the new manual. So I suppose your starting point is that, and this was always the case, is first thing is where is the employee coming from? So are they coming from a country in which Ireland has a double tax agreement or not? Now I would say Ireland has about 73 double tax agreements that are in effect at the moment, so I would say the majority of cases you're probably dealing with an employee who's coming from a country in which Ireland has a DTA. But I'm going to cover off both scenarios this morning. Okay, so I'm now going to kind of get into the detail of what's in the new Revenue Manual, and these are all new rules here, so this would not have applied before, okay, prior to this year. The other thing I'd say is that for people who are familiar with this area, what often happened was that, in general, if an employee was coming to Ireland and they're only going to spend up to 30 work days in Ireland, an employer may take the view, well, they're just incidental to the foreign duties, therefore there's no obligation to operate PAYE. What I would say to you is that you have to forget about that going forward, okay? And you very much need to focus on the new rules now. Okay. So, just to go through those then, say for instance you have an individual employee coming into Ireland and they're just going to come in for 1 year and they're only going to spend up to 60 work days in Ireland in that year. In that situation, there's an exemption from PAYE withholding in that situation, and you don't need to go to Revenue to get approval for that exemption. However, you do need to watch that if that employee is going to return to Ireland in a subsequent year, that can change everything, including the first year. Say for instance you have a different employee then who comes to Ireland for just 1 year and they're going to spend more than 60 work days but less than 183 days in total. In this situation, an exemption from PAYE withholding may apply, subject depending on meeting certain conditions which I'll go through a little bit later. And in this situation, an employer does need to make an application to the Revenue within 30 days of the employee arriving in Ireland, okay? If you want to get a release from the obligation to operate PAYE. If you don't do that, then you have to operate PAYE. More changes here is, say again you have an employee coming from a DTA country, but say that they're going to spend 2 consecutive tax years in Ireland. But say they only spend up to 60 work days in Ireland across those 2 years. In that situation, an exemption from PAYE withholding does apply. An employer does not need to go to Revenue to get that exemption. However, if that particular employee is going to return to Ireland in a subsequent year, that can change everything, including the first 2 years. Say for instance then you have a different employee that comes to Ireland for 2 consecutive years and say they're going to spend more than 60 work days in Ireland in total across those 2 years. In that situation, an exemption from PAYE withholding may apply, depending on whether certain conditions are satisfied. Again, I'm going to cover them in a couple of slides' time. And in this situation, again, an application needs to be made to Revenue within 30 days of the employee arriving in Ireland. Another scenario you could have is, again, say an employee coming from a DTA country, but say they're going to spend more than 2 consecutive tax years in Ireland. In this situation, there's no workday threshold. No workday threshold applies at all. And But an exemption from PAY withholding may still apply, depending again on these conditions that I've mentioned, which I'll go through shortly. And again, you need to make an application to revenue within 30 days of the employee arriving in Ireland in order to get the exemption. So these conditions that I've been mentioning, so the DTA conditions that need to be satisfied to help secure an exemption from Irish PAY withholding are as follows. So a lot of these would have been there before, so people who work in this area will be familiar with them. So the assignee must be resident in the country in which Ireland has a DTA and must not be resident in Ireland for tax purposes. There must be a genuine foreign office or employment. The remuneration must be paid by or on behalf of an employer who is not a resident of Ireland, and the remuneration must not be borne by a permanent establishment of that foreign entity in Ireland. You need to watch the third condition that I just mentioned there, and I've reproduced it there on this slide. I said there that the remuneration must not be paid by or on behalf of an employer, it must be paid who is not a resident of Ireland. What Revenue said in the guide, in the new manual, is that they will not accept that this condition is satisfied where the individual is working for an Irish employer, where the duties performed by the individual are an integral part of the Irish business, or where the individual is replacing a member of staff of an Irish employer, or if the employee is coming into Ireland to gain experience working for an Irish employer, or if they're being supplied and paid by an agency or with an employer outside of Ireland to work for an Irish employer. So what does integral part of business activities mean? Revenue have included in the new manual some factors that employers need to consider in order to determine this particular question, and they are as follows. So, does the foreign employer or the Irish company bear the responsibility or risk for the results produced by the assignee? Does the foreign employer or Irish company authorise, instruct or control where, how and when the work is carried out? Does the assignee report to the foreign employer or the Irish company? Which company is actually responsible for the assignee's performance? And are the role or duties performed by the assignee more typical of the functions of the foreign employer or the Irish company? And I would say if your answers to a lot of these questions lean more towards the Irish company, then you're unlikely to get an exemption for PAY withholding. Okay, as I mentioned earlier, I said I'd go through just the new rules in relation to countries in which we don't have a DTA. And I'd say this is probably quite rare, but I'm sure there's probably a few situations like this. So again, the team is quite similar. The new rules, the way they're structured. Again, if you have an employee coming in from a non-DTA country for just 1 year, and they only spend up to 30 work days in Ireland, then there's an exemption for PAY withholding in that situation. However, if that particular employee is going to return to Ireland in a subsequent year, then sort of all bets are off, and you need to relook at that. What you've probably noticed already is that the Revenue now are expecting employers to basically forecast, what's going to happen in the future. So there's much more onus on employers now to know about how long is an employee going to spend in Ireland this year, next year, the year after, which is quite difficult. So it's going to be very interesting to see how these new rules operate in practice. I can see a lot of challenges with them already, and I wouldn't be surprised if they're changed in the future again. So, sorry, get back to the slide then. So say that a different employee then comes into Ireland for 1 year from a non-DTA country. Say they spend more than 30 work days in Ireland. In that situation, you have to operate PAY withholding. Okay? You don't have the ability to go to Revenue to make an application for exemption because there's no DTA in that country. Moving on then, again, if you have an employee coming in from a non-DTA country who's going to come in for 2 consecutive tax years, and he or she is only going to spend up to 30 work days in Ireland across those 2 years, then there's an exemption for PAY withholding in that situation. However, if that employee is going to return to Ireland in the subsequent year, all bets are off and you have to relook at the whole situation again. Again, if you have a different employee who comes into Ireland from a non-DTA country and they're going to spend 2 consecutive tax years in Ireland and they're going to spend more than 30 work days in Ireland across those 2 years, you must operate PAY withholding in that case. There's no exemption. And obviously the PAY must be calculated by reference to the Irish work days. Also, you say if an individual coming from a non-DTA country who spends more than 2 consecutive tax years in Ireland, there's no threshold in this situation, and you must operate PAY withholding in this case. Just to point out some of the key differences between the DTA and the non-DTA conditions that I just went through. Obviously, with the DTA countries, you've got a 60 workday threshold you need to be mindful of. The fact that there is a double tax agreement in place, that allows you to make a submission to revenue for exemption from PAY withholding if you meet the relevant conditions. Whereas if you look at the non-DTA assignees, obviously you're looking at a 30 workday threshold instead, and because there's no double tax agreement available, then PAY must be operated if you can't get an exemption under what I just went through. So key questions then for employers to consider before an assignment begins. And it also, you need to bear in mind, even if you have not necessarily someone coming on assignment to Ireland, but even just another employee or even an executive whose business travel to Ireland, these new rules equally apply to those people. So the things you need to think about, I would say, this isn't exhaustive, but is the employee resident in a DTA or non-DTA country? Is the pattern of presence foreseeable from the outset? Will the assignee be expected to spend 1, 2 or more years working in Ireland? If it's more than 1 year, how many consecutive years will the assignee work in Ireland? How many work days will the assignee have in Ireland each year? What are the nature of the duties that will be performed in Ireland? Are the role or duties performed by the assignee more typical of the foreign employer or the actual Irish entity? And does the Irish employer bear the cost of the assignee's remuneration? So they're just some of the key questions you need to ask yourself. Just want to cover off a couple more other points that are covered off in the guide. But as I said, I do recommend that if you are working in this area, that you do read the guide in its entirety. As regards to the people who have an ongoing requirement to return to Ireland over a number of years, the situation there is that there isn't an automatic exemption from PAY withholding. So the example I have on screen here is that, say, an individual is required to be in Ireland to attend quarterly meetings. So say they only spend 4 work days in Ireland in total, but they're doing this on a regular basis every year. In this situation, the individual will not automatically qualify for an exemption from PAY withholding, and the employer must apply to revenue for a release from the operation of PAY. And unfortunately, it seems from reading the revenue manual is that you have to make this application every year that you want to apply, okay? Which obviously is going to increase administration and challenges there. But you do need to go to revenue, okay? Just a couple of other final points before I finish up. Just in relation to rotational assignees. So say you have a role that's filled in Ireland by a series of different individuals on a rotational basis. An employer must look at the role as a whole, okay, for the purpose of operating PAY withholding. And for example, say for instance you have 4 individuals who spend 50 consecutive work days in Ireland working in the same role. The employer must look at the role in its entirety, so obviously that adds to 200 work days. So because that's over 60 work days, you then have to look back into the rules and see where you're at. And that's a particular situation, you have to actually make an application to revenue in relation to each of the 4 individuals to confirm if you have an exemption from PAY. Okay. Finally then, just in relation to changes in circumstances, what the revenue manual talks about is that, what they're saying, it's quite clear that you have to make these applications for exemption from PAY within 30 days of the arrival of the assignee or employee in Ireland. That is what you have to do, okay? However, the manual does state that, and I'll read this out to you, that revenue will not penalise an employer for failure to give timely notice where it is not expected or readily apparent that the individual would be present in Ireland for more than 60 work days. So, I suppose if at the outset, you've done all your homework, you've looked at the role, you've looked at the situation, and it is reasonable to assume that the individual wouldn't spend more than 60 work days, that should be fine. However, from the minute that you notice a change, what revenue are saying, you have to go to revenue and tell them that that's changed. And that could result in a situation where you still have an exemption for PAYE, obviously you need to go through conditions and so forth. But you could have a situation where you have to do backdating of PAYE back to when the individual originally came to Ireland. So that's all I have to cover this morning, and I hope you found that useful, and thanks a lot for listening.